Recently, we were chatting. When we do these videos, we try and think of a hook for each video, something that was going to make people click.
Yeah.
And I knew you wanted to do Manic Street Preachers for some time. So I was asking, how can we advertise this? Or like, how can we market this on YouTube? And then you mentioned that during the shoot, you nearly got mugged. So I thought that could be a good angle.
Well, it was all in my head.
What? So it wasn't actually a mugging?
No.
Okay.
I mean, we can get into that, but I really genuinely thought I was going to get all my camera equipment stolen.
So
but
you were scared. So it is something we can put on the thumbnail and title.
Yeah, but it's
a bit cheeky.
It was kind of the hysteria of a young photographer just starting out.
Okay.
Who thinks
you've got all this expensive equipment.
And I'm up in London. London's a scary place.
Yeah, for sure. When you're young and if you didn't grow up there.
Yeah, and I grew up on a pig farm.
Yeah.
I mean, the area that we chose to do the shoot was a bit scary.
Well, we'll go into that. So, who were you shooting it for to begin with?
So the magazine was Select, who I worked for in the 90s, sort of really bright, colourful pop magazine. And the shoot was 1993, so I would have been 27.
Okay, yeah. Year older than me. Okay. So you were still living in Devon at that point?
God no, I was up in London.
Okay, you were living in London. So.
I bought my flat in Bethnal Green in 91.
Okay. What a time to be alive, to be able to buy a flat at 24.
Yeah, well, I bought my first flat with Howell in 89.
See, you can't do that anymore.
Well, you don't want to be putting this on the channel because it sort of seems like a smug fest.
Yeah.
But no, it was a different time.
Well, how much was your first flat?
My first flat was £80,000.
Okay.
In Bethnal Green.
And you'd have a mortgage for that, so you saved up
Well, Howell and I went halves.
Okay. So
we're going off on a tangent.
You got a house in Bethnal Green for 40,000.
I got half a 3-bedroom flat.
That's crazy.
And then immediate.
I know, obviously, because I know you, but you've credited this to, I guess, your success now more so than your photography. I feel like.
Yeah, I mean, in parallel with good choices to invest in property and so on, I was able to kind of parlay my ability as a photographer to actually earning a living and therefore service a mortgage and get a mortgage in the first place.
So you've been shooting magazines for a few years by this point when you bought your first place with Howell.
Well, 4 years. So 93, I started properly in 1989.
Yeah.
And
so in your first year, you gained enough to go halves with a flat with...
No, that's another story. Back then you could lie about your income. So I got a friend to say that she had a production company and she had a proper job. I mean, she was earning decent money. And I was working as a runner on these commercials that her production company were making with big photographers, proper photographers. I cheekily asked her if she would give me a letter saying that I was employed by this production company and I was on £25,000 a year. It's complete rubbish. And it was in the day before computers properly took over and everything was cross-checked.
You can't do background checks and
it was ridiculous. And I got a mortgage.
Wow.
Yeah.
What a time to be alive.
And then by the time I bought my second flat, the first flat was massively in negative equity. So it was worth £30,000 less than we paid for it. So we calmly rented it out and then lied again about our income and bought a single property each.
Okay.
The person I jointly bought the first property with, we both became neighbours in University House where we lived throughout a big part of the 90s.
Yeah, cool. So I don't know how much of that I'm going to include, but thanks for breaking that down. I think it's important. We were actually going to do a video about financials in being creative.
I mean, if anyone's interested in that, then I think just say so, because it's an important part of keeping the whole show on the road. Yeah. I think although I don't sound it, I'm half American. Yeah. So your grandfather wasn't shy about talking about money, and it's a very British thing not to put that underneath the carpet and everything. But it is the advances I made were when I grasped that nettle and started to sort of realise that money is a good barometer to determine whether people take you seriously and whether they value you.
Yeah, it's true. And being smart, I guess, yeah, some smart decisions, especially in a career which is,
Yeah.
you don't know when your next paycheck's going
Well,
to
I'm
be.
constantly badgering you lot to get pensions and lices, but this is a whole other ball
Well,
game.
if you want a video on this, let us know. So back to Manic Street Preachers. So it was in '93, and you mentioned, I don't know if you mentioned the video yet, but you mentioned previously you shot the two of them. There's four of them, and you shot each
That's right.
two separately.
Well, at the time, it was a 4-piece band, and it was the constituent parts were very different. So you had two cousins who were kind of the engine of the band, the musicians, brilliant musicians, James Dean Bradfield, who was like the singer, and Sean, who was on drums. And so it was decided that I would do reportage, black and white pictures of them, and then we'd lean into the other part of the band, which was the glamour. So I'd shoot Nicky Wire and, of course, Richey James, who was the lead singer and the lyricist as well.
Yeah.
And I'd photograph them in a sort of very kind of glamorous or contrived environment. So we opted for Brompton Cemetery.
Okay, and this is where we get onto the mugging or potential mugging.
Yeah. So
we'll do the cemetery first, and then we'll go on to the reportage.
The cemetery, it's quite extraordinary. I mean, there are a few places like this. Highgate Cemetery is another one where I was asked to photograph Jarvis Cocker, but didn't do it in the end.
Oh, yeah.
But these overgrown, sort of Victorian, very atmospheric locations. And Brompton Cemetery is like that, and I think it's near the Fulham Road. And it was near the rehearsal studio where the other bandmates, I would be photographing them later. I got there early, I parked my car,
Why did they separate them?
It was, I guess, quite often when you interview and you photograph a band, when you feature a band or even in an individual person, magazines, they have what they call an angle. So their angle was that you have Nicky and Richey, who aren't really musicians, but provide the glamour. And then you have
What would
Sean
they be doing on stage if they're not?
Richey was sort of, I guess, second lead guitar, because James, the lead singer, was a brilliant guitarist.
Right.
And so Richey he became the lyricist, though. He became the sort of soul of the band in a way. Because he was
the aesthetic one.
He was the one that provided the kind of ethos, drove that ethos of kind of working class Welsh, very nationalistic actually, but very much a mixture of socialism, nihilism, and even in the case of Nicky, sort of narcissism. I think I saw a quote, and that's what he said. And so they were extraordinary. I mean, those two cousins were very different. I mean, they were quite uncomplicated, really into the music, whereas the aesthetic and the lyrics came from Richey and Nicky.
Okay, so that angle was to separate them. I don't think I agree with that.
I don't think they particularly liked it.
Yeah, no.
And at the end of the shoot, I did actually do a group shot with all four of them.
We'll get onto that. So you arrive at the cemetery.
Yeah, so I arrived at the cemetery and I was really early. I thought, I'm going to scope it out. It's always a good. It's really pointless and stupid to arrive late, obviously. But even arriving on time is not a good idea. It's always good to arrive early, take a deep breath, have a look around, get a sense of all the creative possibilities. Half an hour before I was due to meet them, I parked up and strolled into the cemetery on my own. And it's quite spooky.
What time was it?
It was in the middle of the day,
Okay.
but it has a sort of gothic kind of melancholy about it. And I was sort of walking...
as most
it's a
graveyards
cemetery.
have.
And there were all these kind of guys walking around. And then I sort of found this catacomb, sort of a big tomb, a structure where they have the kind
indoors,
of... An indoors, kind of a temple,
Yeah.
a temple to the dead. And I thought, oh, that might be quite good, because if it rains, I can get them in there. And also, if you're underneath a roof, you can use the light. It will come in from the side. There might be some atmospheric light that I can use.
Renaissance lighting.
Yeah, absolutely. Coming from the side rather than from the top. And so I went in there and had my camera bag, with my Hasselblad and all my kit. And I suddenly realised I wasn't on my own. and there were lots of men in this. In this,
How big was it?
it was quite large and quite dark. And
Okay.
initially, you couldn't really tell there was anyone there.
Homeless or something?
I thought at the time that it was possibly homeless. There was a lot more homelessness back then, and I was aware that I had this camera that was worth, and lenses that were worth thousands of pounds, and also back then, I wouldn't have been able to replace them. I couldn't afford insurance, and so I sort of scuttled out of there, and I was a bit chilled. I was a bit disturbed, by the experience.
Did any of them talk to you?
No, I got the hell out. I just made a mental note not to bring Richey and Nicky in there, because there were people in there and it was a bit spooky.
Yeah.
And it was only like a few months later, and I was sort of talking about the shoot and this experience that I'd found discombobulating, that someone more worldly than me explained that Brompton Cemetery is a well-known cruising area for gay men. So I'd stumbled into kind of.
You probably thought you were joining them.
Yeah, absolutely, and were I kind of that way inclined, and not about to do a photo shoot, who knows what would have happened.
Okay, so you avoided the tomb.
Yeah, I avoided the tomb, and as I got back to where my car was parked, they'd arrived.
Okay.
And I sort of ushered them in, and it was very much me. It was very contrived. I was directing them. They didn't need any direction. They had their own kind of louche kind of way. They kind of.
So it sounds they're easy to work with.
They were just incredibly photogenic.
Yeah.
I know I've said this to you before, but Richey was the most photogenic person I've ever photographed.
You said that about so many people.
He was incredible. I think it's because there was an intelligence about him. There was something about him. And I remember thinking, because the lead singer's called James Dean Bradfield, I remember thinking that Richey was a bit like James Dean. That must have been what it was like to photograph James Dean.
Right.
His eyes were, you couldn't see where the pupils and the irises began and ended, so they were just like black.
Yeah.
And he obviously
very gothic, works well for the
yeah, I mean
scenario.
he looked extraordinary, and he had something about him. He wasn't like loud or anything like that. Nicky was a bit bitey and scratchy, not terribly friendly, but they went along with my instructions.
Everything you need, yeah.
Yeah, and I got my pictures. The interesting thing was I shot it with my Hasselblad, and I actually cross-processed it the other way.
So that's when you make it so it's got colours. The colours are brighter. But if you do it the other way, does it mean you make colours are more dull?
So usually with cross-processing, you're taking transparency film, like a transparent, it's like a slide, and you end up with a negative. But in this instance, you can do it the other way around. So you can start with a negative film, and you put it through a transparency process, an E6, and you end up with a transparency, and the colours are really weird. There's an element of luck involved, but they came out, they were spectacular.
They're the pictures that will run.
Yeah,
oh,
and
cool.
It's one of my favourite pictures,
Okay.
because although back then I was sort of trying to control things too much, it was partly who I was at that time.
Yeah.
They weren't going to be controlled. They were like cats, actually. They were kind of like very much there in their own world, and they were sort of allowing me what they allowed me.
Yeah.
But actually that was better. And so they just they sat down in amongst the graves, and they just did what they did. And that's why the pictures are sort of natural. And I really like that picture.
Yeah. Now we've spoken about Nicky and Richey.
Yeah. When I did James, the lead singer, and Sean,
Yeah.
It was a bit like the Primal Scream thing when I got Primal Scream and we did a video about it, and they were playing for me. I don't know if it made the edit.
Well, playing music for you.
Yeah, they were playing just so I could do live pictures in black and white. It was very similar to that.
Yeah.
Tri-X film, 35mm. And
documentary.
yeah, it's just one of those moments as a photographer where you just pinch yourself because you think they're doing a gig for me. And although it was just the two of them and they didn't have the glamour aspect of the Manic Street Preachers, I can still feel their hair on the back of my neck.
So they're just practicing without the other two members of the band.
because you've got the drums and then the lead singer and the guitarist, so they're pretty much...
They don't need the other two.
Well, they can get by without the other two.
Yeah.
I mean, they didn't have... Basically, I think Nicky played bass.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
But they were so tight and, so sort of charismatic, and it was just a pleasure, It was just... I had to stop and say, you guys, you sound amazing, like a stupid, crazed fan,
Yeah.
But it was, it's one of those things where I remember doing Birdie, who did Skinny Love, and then after we did the photo shoot in her house, she had this. It was actually her grandparents' house. She had this grand piano. This should be another video, and she played Skinny Love a cappella. Played the piano, and it was just. We didn't know what to say. We were just speechless afterwards.
Oh, these are the best moments of the job.
Absolutely, and it was like that. And I really, like with Radiohead, I've been a fan ever since, and I've liked them more and more. And then obviously the tragic news of what happened to Richey, was really upsetting. And when that sort of thing happens, it changes how photographs are perceived. And so the photograph of Richey, he was a troubled guy.
Yeah. He's an enigma.
And actually, the kind of difficult issues that he was dealing with were all there in the photograph, and that's why the photograph's compelling. Because there was an incident when I was at the NME where he was being interviewed by Steve Lamacq, and it's really famous. It's part of the folklore. Yeah. Also, he was 27, an age when a lot of
the 27 Club.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And this incident happened in Norwich. He was playing a gig, and Steve Lamacq, who I used to work with at the NME, he's now on Radio 6 or whatever. Great guy. He was doing an interview with the Manics, and he sort of implied that some of how serious they are, how sincere they are, sometimes it doesn't come across. And Richey, sort of as he was talking, managed to get a razor blade from somewhere, and he carved out 4 reel into his arm. And I remember being in the NME offices, everyone was in shock. It was such a bizarre situation. I think the picture, which was taken by a guy called Ed Sears, I think it made the cover of the NME, but there was talk about whether it should have done, and I don't think it would do now, because that was probably evidence of an individual dealing with issues. And certainly we know a lot more about mental health and cutting, and he suffered from bulimia as well.
Yeah, that's not sane.
No,
thing to do. Yeah, it's
self-destructive. But he really. I think Nicky, for instance, was married and had a relationship, and the others had other things outside of the band. But I think Richey, he was all in, and the band was everything to him. And that's sometimes people who are really, really talented and really, really creative. They can kind of cut ties with reality. You know, I mean, no one really knows what happened to him. It's still kind of unsolved.
I think that's good. Anything else? Do you want to do a print? Do you want to?
Yeah. Why don't we do?
The one on your wall down there is quite nice.
Yeah. Why don't we do an edition of the print of Richey and Nicky in the Brompton Cemetery? Yeah. That would be really cool. Right, cool. I'd like to get that out there. I think it might be in the National Portrait Gallery, but it's one of my.
I've seen it in there.
It's one of my favourite pictures.
Cool. All right. Well, check it out on the website if you want it, and thanks for watching.
Thank you.
Bye bye.